The government may be committed to Lord's reform, but not necessarily the shape it should take. And that creates the room for negotiation, which it appears potential Conservative rebels are now seeking to exploit. The reports in newspapers of last night's meeting of the 1922 committee, the forum for Tory backbenchers, are all very similar. They suggest that only one MP spoke up in favour of the proposals and that some of the government's unpaid parliamentary aides are threatening to vote against. In May of last year, the government suggested the Lords should be cut to 300 members, of whom 60 would be appointed. The other 240 would be elected using the single transferable vote and serve for 15 years. Since there are around 800 peers at the moment, how to shrink the number is one source of contention. Perhaps most important, though, is whether a largely elected Lords would challenge the traditional supremacy of the House of Commons. Ministers say the balance of power won't change, but Tory MPs are unconvinced. I've been speaking to one of them, Conor Burns, at present parliamentary aide to the Northern Ireland Secretary, Owen Paterson.
I think it was a very candid and very honest meeting. A lot of people were there to make very clear that they have profound reservations about what may be contained in the Queen's speech on reform of the House of Lords.
We have the outline of a Lord's proposal from the government, although it says it wants to negotiate and expects to negotiate on the detail to build consensus. What is your objection, given that your party was committed to reform a mainly elected second chamber in the election manifesto on which you stood as a candidate, and the coalition agreement with the Liberal Democrats, which presumably you also supported as a Conservative MP, includes proposals for a wholly or mainly elected upper chamber?
Look, this is a massive constitutional issue, and many of us have long-held views on this, that the House of Lords, first of all, works. It's demonstrated that it works by the number of amendments that the House of Lords make to Commons legislation that the Commons routinely accepts. It works in a way that the House of Commons remains absolutely supreme. The House of Lords' power, funnily enough, lies in its ultimate powerlessness because the Commons can have its way. Every time this has been dealt with before, it's been treated by previous governments as a free vote because it is a constitutional issue. And I think this time it should be exactly the same.
But what makes this qualitatively different from you going through the division lobbies, for example, on something that many of your colleagues didn't support the government on, and that was Europe at the end of last year? They were prepared to take a different line on that. Why do you put this above all those other issues?
What is fundamentally different about this is this forever alters the relationship between the House of Commons and the House of Lords.
Even though specifically the government said in its white paper last year that it does not, that there will be no change in the balance of power.
Well, it's very clear that there will be a change because people who are elected will have more of a mandate than people who are appointed.
You're asking for a free vote, though, on something that you stood on a manifesto committed to do, which is to have a mainly elected second chamber.
Well, the manifesto commitment was to work to build a consensus. And I think what the meeting last night and other conversations we've been having with colleagues, there is not a consensus within the Conservative Party on this. It has previously always been a subject of a free vote. And I'm sure that as the government look at it and as the whips make clear to the authorities within the government, that will be something that they will consider as we approach the Queen's speech and the subsequent legislative programme.
One of your colleagues, it was said in some of the newspaper reports this morning, was willing to resign as a parliamentary aide over this. Was that something that came up during the meeting?
The meeting was about conveying a mood of a large number of colleagues of concern. We haven't got firm proposals on the table. We'll have to see what the proposals are. I think it's premature for anybody to be talking about resigning. We want to get to a point where we can have something on the table that improves the House of Lords, that makes it a more effective revising chamber, that doesn't rival the power and mandate of the House of Commons. And if the government can come up with that in the weeks and months ahead, then they can come forward with proposals that will unite us.
Could you vote for the reforms that have been proposed so far? Were they presented as part of the Queen's speech next month?
My view hasn't changed to the view I expressed in the House of Commons to the Deputy Prime Minister, that I am in favour broadly of the status quo.
So in those circumstances, you would follow your conscience on this, even if it meant you had to give up your job as a parliamentary aide?
Well, I very much hope that it wouldn't come to that. As I say, every time when Mr Blair brought these similar proposals forward, he allowed the entire government and the entirety of Parliament a free vote on this. And I hope that we can get to that point again and everyone can express their view. And if the Deputy Prime Minister is right, that there is a majority in the House of Commons across Parliament, across the parties, for this, then it will go through.
That was the Conservative MP Conor Burns. Lords